Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 16 of Just Crunch It. With us today we have Krishna Sharma or Krish, who is a senior engineering leader at Prime Video and is based out of Berlin. Just before, Krishna was a senior engineering leader at AWS. Krishna is so deep into engineering that he's handled various leadership roles at enterprises and startups alike. The names of SAP Labs, Avayath, Deutsche Bahn, Google, amongst others. We're going to talk about everything enterprises, corporates, and whatnot. I'm super excited about this. Welcome to the show, Krishna. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vikram. I'm doing good. And how are you doing?
I'm good. Very excited about the topics we have planned for us. When you were brainstorming, I remember when we started, the topic was very like you gave out a phrase, and I was like, oh my god, what am I going to talk about for so long? But when we started diving deeper into it, I personally have so many questions around how engineering and data security and privacy, a lot of what we discuss. So I think our audience is also going to really love it, and super excited for doing like this. Thank you for taking the time out. But before we get into any of it, I was going through your profile, saw very interesting roles, very interesting switches. Like the kind of organizations you've worked in, there's a plethora of things you may have jumped between. I love to focus on a very raw version of like what you think has shaped everything up, like what has contributed the most to your career, how did Krishna become Krishna, and like what are you doing today? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was a bit lucky that I started my career from an engineering consultancy. I have been an engineering consultant for about 10 years of my career. As a consultant and leader, I actually met a lot of different people, different personalities, and different people having different values. I got the opportunity to solve some really interesting problems. Sometimes the problems were so unique and so complex that I did not enjoy being that situation. But looking back, I feel so grateful. And again, I feel so lucky that I got the opportunities and I got the people I met because I think they are all who made me what I am. I actually encountered a lot of very smart individuals who slowly became my mentors, and they helped me learn a lot about engineering, a lot about leadership, a lot about taking strategic decisions. And this is basically what I can say about me.
Awesome. Krishna, I have a very off the beat question. So you were long back, you were in India, right? Like, and you started consulting Indian engineers, consultant friends of mine. And I want to know, by the way, like, how did you get started into consultancy out of personal curiosity again? But Indian friends who are into engineering, they're very always engrossed into like work, if nothing else, right? There's a lot of hours that they're spending. You've been at like for quite a while in Berlin today. Has that changed? Apart from like what the natural change is because of, let's say, life as we like I remember 10 years back the younger version of Vikram was much more hardworking, so that is a factor of like age and things change with that. But otherwise, has there been a shift in your personal perspective as far as the work style, work culture goes between Bangalore and Berlin?
I would say definitely yes. My younger years, I can remember working 12, 14 hours sometimes, that too from Monday to Saturday. It was a very churn inducive time, but I learned a lot during that phase. After that, I think ever since I was working for SAP, I always had good amount of work-life balance, even in India. And now when I'm in Berlin, in Germany, I see a very different cultural shift. Like here, people see job as job and personal life as personal. In a way, I think now I'm also used to this particular culture. It is very good. It makes you feel very relaxed, and it kinds of give you a different perspective to life other than just chasing maybe money or maybe chasing careers. At the same time, as Berlin is a startup capital of Germany for sure, I think I have not lost the appetite for doing something interesting or solving something challenging. So luckily, I'm in Berlin, and it has helped me keep a balance of personal life plus driving my career forward. But being an Indian, as you
Yeah.
know, like we are still more career oriented. So I think I cannot get rid of that part of myself.
It's ingrained in you. It's so nice. So I love Berlin as a city. At this point of time in the year, it's also super green. Like
Yeah.
it's a beautiful month to be in Berlin. I remember being there. But on your story of like the difference between hey, work is work and life is life. It's so interesting. Like right now as well, my friends in US. I don't think I've shared this story with them. This is maybe 6 7 years back. I was with my friend. We were in France, and I was with Sprinkler back then. So Sprinkler had a France Paris office, and we were working on a client project, very intensive project. We were all stressed out and whatnot. And in the process of like, so he was sitting like this on the table and thinking about something, and then in the process of like, right, like it's just let that breath out. And it's so normal. Like I can think of people around me back in India. Like this is right. Like you're always
Yeah.
because somehow unfortunately, so stress is a part of life. But I remember so many people turned around and they were like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, what happened? What? Why are they asking? Is he okay? And then I realized, oh my god, so it's so nice, and I admire it. Plus, I relate to the point of Berlin and the startup capital. I have some phenomenal engineer friends from Berlin, so great city. But before we move on to like everything else, because we've talked about life, career, culture, and whatnot broadly, like what would you say are your top three learnings uh, as you look back?
Yeah. So when I think about my career and I spoke about the mentor summit and different opportunities, I think the top three learnings would be in no particular order. First is being a force multiplier. This means that you are always willing to collaborate. You are always willing to share what you have learned. You want to empower your peers. You want to empower your reports. You want to empower everyone around you. I feel sometimes it is better to be slow in the beginning if you can move faster. And this is basically where the principle of force multiplication comes into picture. This is how you earn trust, and you not just grow your own teams, but you grow everyone around you.
Love it,
Second
love it.
thing would be balancing long term versus short term decisions. While working across different companies as a consultant, I saw that sometimes companies are going for short term bets, or sometimes they're going for only long term bets. But while working in Amazon, I learned one thing interesting. It is like a leadership principle here that leaders are right a lot, and I think it brings so much value to it. Right, as a leader, you have to take risky bets to make sure that your team is growing, your organization is growing, and your business is flourishing. And that's why I think being a leader, it is very, very crucial that you do a good judgment call and you are able to balance long term versus short term decisions. And last thing is like very simple: have fun. This is something I learned when I came to Berlin. While working with people around, even though they work there 40, 45 hours, they actually enjoy what they are doing. They, every fiber of their being is involved in solving particular problem or doing particular task for those 40 hours. And I have not seen this amount of concentration and productivity when I was in India, when I was seeing people churning hours and hours and hours. So I feel that you are most effective when you are enjoying what you are doing, and this is something I recommend to everyone.
Why is that? Like, why? Like, how do you think we, as in like folks back in India, can move to that state? Because it's so important. Like, what are we doing otherwise, right? Like, and I relate to it again. So how do we get to that spot?
I feel that it is more about individual priority and also more of a cultural change. Um, we have like somewhat of a culture similar to Japan, that if you work more hours, people get a perception that you are more hardworking. I think the perception need to change. Perception should be more about how many problems are you solving, what is your productivity, instead of what is the number of hours you are spending. And if you can do a task in 5 hours, it is perfectly fine. You work those 5 hours with full concentration, you get your task done, and I think you should be able to move on, right? Because everyone works at a different pace. So we require a cultural shift. I already see some of my peers. I basically mentored a lot of people. Even now I mentor a lot of people, and some of my mentees who are back in India working for SAP or VMware and companies like that, they are now saying that they see a cultural shift already. Most of the young engineers who are freshers, they want to maintain a good work and life balance, and now even their leaders are empowering that. So I'm very bullish that we will see a cultural shift, maybe not immediately, but in a decade for sure.
Yeah, Japan. You brought Japan up. Japan is a very different story, and it's so interesting. I happen to have a friend of mine who has been living in Japan for 4 years. He can speak Japanese. He's fluent. Like he knows all the things. And I went there, and I was like, as tourists are, or as like outsiders are, I was there on a work thing, and for a very short period. But he's like sharing things about, hey, you know what, like when you're drinking a cup of tea, don't do this. Like when you're eating sushi, dip it like this. And then he was talking about how the Japanese philosophy has evolved in terms of like all the way from World War II to like the pre-World War era, and then post it as well, all the unfortunate incidents that have happened, the tsunami and everything. How Japan as a culture has assumed that life is very uncertain and that a lot of unfortunate things are going to happen. So things are stacked against them, and there was like this whole narrative of let's work hard, so that we can like overcome the obstacles that are in our path. And there's like a whole bunch of, so I don't want to make this about that, like though that is a very interesting topic, and I'm always very like, I love Japan as a country. But
Yeah.
uh, I want to like get back into the meat here, Krishna. So I know you have exposure to enterprises and decision making, right? Like a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, like how are things moving. And I'm sure today, when you open your LinkedIn, there's like maybe 10 people at the very least reaching out to you. I get more than 10 messages. I can imagine you getting much more, given that you are at Prime Videos and like previously in your different roles. So the and plus we have like a lot of data enthusiasts, like audience folks here, data founders, and these people, they're somewhere hoping that, oh, we're going to solve this problem, build a phenomenal product, walk up to an enterprise, and get a deal signed for $100,000 or $1 million. And I've seen my friends talk about it casually. At times I'm guilty of talking about it casually. It doesn't happen that way. Like when you start selling to enterprises, and Crunch typically caters mostly, preferably to
Mhm.
enterprises, we see things moving very slow. Like sometimes it's so slow that you're taking two calls in a month, and you would be frustrated that, oh my god, what are we doing as a startup? And the enterprise is thinking that they're moving fast with two calls a month. So this is just the time factor. So there's a lot of hurdle between someone knocking on the door of an enterprise to a deal actually closing. Given your experience and exposure and all the chat we had before we started like recording this today, I want to talk about like what's really happening. Like what are those hurdles? Could you talk about how are deals made in enterprises? And then maybe I'd love to dive deeper into specific
Yeah.
aspects.
Just speaking about the deals, I think every person who is trying to sell something should always think from customer's perspective first and understand the customer. So startups first need to understand what is an enterprise. Basically, enterprises are large organizations with thousands of employees. They have multiple departments, business units, and they don't have a single decision maker. Their decision makers are spread across the organization. And due to this particular sheer size itself, it leads to complexity in navigating between the different departments and finding the right engineering leader who feel your product is interesting for them. And then even after that, the final decision is going to be made between that engineering leader, the finance team. Then legal has to approve, okay, if this is the right thing to do or not, right? So I think this is something very important, which startups need to think when they are thinking about deals with enterprises. Basically, you are getting into a marathon, as simple as that. Apart from that, you already mentioned the sales cycles are very, very long, and of course, they are bureaucratic. Startups also have to think that they are not the only one reaching out to that particular person. There are multiple vendors who are approaching, and I always believe that if you want to go somewhere, you should like break it down in goals and go, one step at a time. So I would recommend any startups or founders to first find some small scale organizations where they can successfully demonstrate how their product is solving the problems for that particular organization. And then this becomes a very solid data point for the enterprises as well. You can go and tell them, hey, I've worked with these 5 customers and I was able to solve this particular data related problems for them. I was able to increase their customer retention by maybe 10%. I was able to generate maybe 100K more in revenue, or we were able to save cost, or we increased the productivity by XYZ factor. So when you have this kind of data and you reach out to someone, even if you do not need your product at that point in time, they would be happy to come back to you at later point in time. And the last thing is
Yeah.
that there are factors like security, GDPR, compliance. I would definitely love to speak about them. And as we go ahead with the conversation, I will deep dive on these other topics, and they are also very crucial if you want to do any sort of deal with an enterprise.
Yeah, I have so many questions before we get into all the security aspects. Like, so as you were talking about it, I was putting myself as a founder, and I'm approaching enterprises. Like, what am I facing? So maybe this is not about Crunch, but at Crunch, what we do typically is best uh, done for an organization that has, let's say, 10 analysts or 7 analysts, 5 analysts at the very least, which means that you have, if you're 5 analysts, our belief is that you have a good enough data structure or you care about your data to a certain extent. That also means that you have reached a certain stage. You would not hire 5 analysts as a seed stage company or a Series A stage company, which means you are maybe Series C plus. That means you have a certain number of employees, you have a certain revenue levels, and all of those. That's all fine, right? Like now, my intent is to go to an organization and say, hey, you know what? I can make your data teams 90% more efficient.
Mhm.
I can save their time. I can reduce your operational costs, and then everything in terms of forecast and like an AI agent available at your disposal and all the possibilities that can be detailed out on a case to case basis depending on who I'm speaking to, what is the use case that's most relevant. All of that's true. But I remember going to a smaller company, right? Like, and this is all being tied up to your point of go demonstrate the value with a smaller company first or a mid-sized company first before going all the way to the enterprise. So I went to a very successful mid-sized company and I went and said, hey, we have done this, would you prefer taking this up? And they were like, oh, we love it, we know what we are doing is not optimum,
Mhm.
but we are a Series B company, and every direction we look into, we have lower hanging fruits. So while from your POV, this data thing that you're talking about is something we should fix, from our point of view, it's one of the 30 things that we should fix, right? Like, and we would love to do it. Like, this would become a revenue direct driver of revenue for us. It today as well is, but our revenue can equally be influenced by a lot of other low hanging fruits. Maybe once we have through Series C, we would have a bunch of folks coming in specifically for this, which means that after Series C, Series D, like whatever that stage is, they're no longer a very small company. They're almost behaving like an enterprise. They may not have as many rules or as many guidelines, but when I say enterprise, I in general mean an organization which is tough to navigate. Like right from knocking on the door for the first time to like actually reaching out to the right buyer, and sometimes just asking that question, that are you the right decision maker, that takes itself 2 3 discovery calls,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's extremely slow. And on the other end, on all the challenges you mentioned, I remember walking into this discussion, and this customer success director, the very successful company, again, this woman, phenomenal woman, very confident. She handles about 350 million plus of ARR per year, right? Like, this is not that long back, 10 days, 12 days back. And I was talking about, hey, we do this, things are moving slow. And she was like, why are you going after enterprises? And I was like, here's why. And I pretty much explained a bunch of like facts, a bunch of whatever I said just now. And she was like, okay, it makes sense. But Vikram, what's going to happen is, so I was like, okay, here's what I did. We went ahead with 10 customers out of a wait list of about so many people, because we published some videos and a lot of data leaders got excited. They were like, we want to try it out. We're like, we went ahead with 10 because we didn't want to piss these people off.
Mhm.
Like, if let's say let's pick a big company, let's pick Nike, right? Like, now if Nike is a likely customer, you don't want to piss that relationship, like piss them off or like burn that bridge. Which means I was like, okay, if we have so many people who have shown interest, let's not just go and initiate 30 conversations, because we are a small team, we'll not be able to handle 30 conversations. So let's do a really good job with 10 people.
Mhm.
And turns out, of course, if at the rate of 2 calls a month, things are moving slow and you're feeling like, oh my God, there's not enough to do. Are we doing something wrong? So I went to her and I very transparently told her that this is what's happening. And in my head, I keep debating as a CEO or as a founder that should I just pick all the 30 other people who are on the wait list? Maybe I would at some point of time have to disappoint them. And she was like, oh, why are you waiting for it? I was like, because I don't want to get into that spot where I'm not able to handle the request. She was like, you know what? If 10 people are talking to you, 9 out of them will tell you that they're going to call you with like a purchase order, and they're probably never going to call because they have a vendor which is doing something related to data. And by the way, these enterprises, the way they work, there's this point of contact or champion for the other company who's going to go in and tell that company that, hey, we are considering a competitor tool, and we are considering it honestly because they have these 5 new things in their product. And that vendor that they're speaking to, the third party, that's already established vendor. They have an established team, they have established presence. So the vendor comes and says, you know what, like, we're going to add it to our roadmap if you renew the deal with us right now. Why go take the risk of a new vendor, go through the whole security process? You and I can have like mutual benefits and so on. And there are these deal complications as well, that you did everything right. You picked the right problem, you picked the right buyer, you went and talked about all the things that you should have spoken, you nailed the presentation, they like it, they may still not move ahead. That was where I was like, oh my God, enterprises are like, I have worked with enterprises all my life, but I was not the one who was closing those enterprises. And I would wonder sometimes at Sprinkler, we would get these emails that we had been chasing this company for 3 quarters, we'd been chasing this company for 3 years, right? And I was like, what's happening? Like, why would you chase the company for 3 years? The 3 buying cycles that have happened in between, and then there are like multi-year contracts, right? Like, so they don't want to, a lot of more complications. So I 100% relate to it. But as I was speaking any of this, like, do you want to add anything to everything that I just said?
I think when I think about the problem you mentioned, sometimes you just have to be lucky. I always say that luck is also a skill. It always ties back to that life is not always fair, and I would say you should still follow up with these contacts which you have made. Maybe not now, but maybe after a year or so. So in my experience, I have seen that sometimes you are happy with a vendor, but then you know as the company grows, the use cases changes, and then your vendor has a particular niche where they are sorry that the enterprise have a particular niche where they want to work for, and your vendor has a different niche where they are operating, and sooner or later there will be some divergence happening. And I think that is the point where you can come and you can capitalize with the additional 5 features you mentioned. And even if someone says that, yeah, I will go and put these 5 features on the roadmap, in my experience, I have seen that you will established vendor will be having at least 100 customers, all 100 of them saying some different feature is their priority. In the end, their product will come, they will stack rank everything, and they will see, okay, so out of these 100 requests, only 5 make sense, and based upon our engineering capacity and the speed of development, we can maybe only do 4. And most probably they will do this for their biggest customers, and maybe the some of the smaller customers would end up waiting. So in long run, if you just follow up after a year or two, I'm pretty sure that there will be a window of opportunity with some of these contacts via which you can sell your product to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, like, this episode, for all our listeners, it's not meant to like demotivate you. In fact, I am actively going after more and more enterprises, but I just want people to be aware of what they're getting into when they say that we are going into enterprises. And I see the statement being floated around very casually. Oh, we target mid to large scale enterprises. And I'm like, okay, it's easier said than done. But Krishna, I want to get back to the other thing you talked about, which was the security aspect and so on. So let's pretend like you are my buyer. I come to you, right? Like, pick any company you can do, like, pick on whatever role. But I come to you and I say, hey, so we are Crunch. We work with data sets. if you have a question that an analyst needs 5 days to answer and they have to write 600 queries and interpret things and stitch data, clean things, do a business mapping to raw data, all of those things, semantic mapping, we can do all of it for you. And our AI agent can be purpose built to specifically answer terms for you, meaning like if you're a CFO, you know what, like revenue, I know as a CFO you mean booked revenue, realized revenue. As a CRO you mean booked revenue, but our system is intelligent enough, it will understand that, oh, Krishna is a CRO, so when he says revenue, only talk about booked revenue.
Mhm.
And when Vikram is a CFO, he's asking about it, talk about realized revenue. So I can do all of this and I can save you time and money and blah, and like, right, like I come to you with all my energy, vigor, enthusiasm. Now in your head as a buyer, what are you thinking? Because you talked about data privacy, security, legal, internal pushback, right? Like for AI adoption, cost, everything. Like, could you just walk me through your frame of mind? Let's say you like my demo as well,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you go in and say, hey, Vikram, I want to make, like, I want to get this to, like, go to the next step. But it's easier said than done. Like, you also have to fight a battle internally. So, what are those points of concerns broadly?
Yeah, so I think this point will definitely lead to some very interesting debate, because first thing first, enterprises are more old school than what anyone can expect. Enterprises want to be safe from the legal, compliance, regulatory perspectives. They cannot compromise with quality because they have to maintain the shareholder value. And that's why, in my experience so far, I have seen enterprises or even large scale companies, they are happy to sacrifice speed or some amount of productivity for quality or to maintain status quo. Now, I think, if example, if we take Crunch AI as a solution for data analysis, and your sales rep is approaching me, I can think of some of the following challenges, right? So example, I would like to know about, okay, what is the return of investment if I adopt your product? What it will be required from my end to integrate your product to my platform, and then of course, is it worth the efforts? And if you are able to convince me and say yes, it is worth the effort, then I would like to also understand how soon I can see those returns coming. And the last thing would be, what happens if my requirement changes or I have some new request? Will you be able to adapt to my needs? I think this is the first thing which I will be thinking, which is more from the overall value, because business is all about, like, cost, how you can optimize the cost, how you can generate more cost. This is the first thing. um,
Yeah.
by the way, like the first thing we just said, I call it priority zero. If
Yeah.
Even if you want to
Of
sell a
course.
pen, you have to have some ROI, why this pen is a good investment for you, as simple as that. But after you have gone through this first hurdle, the second hurdle is more about the general lack of awareness how AI actually works. AI is basically a black box. As a potential buyer, most of the time people do not know how AI is working within. Even the people who are developing AI does not know sometimes how it is working internally. Like, you are running all these models. I'm pretty sure Crunch might be running some ML models, doing some sort of training. And a lot of these models are pre-configured. They are made ages ago, and people are consuming them and making them better and better with each iteration, right? But what is
Yeah.
happening inside, no one is aware of. This is the first thing. Second thing is that, so you still have this model and you are saying that, yeah, this model is great, but how you can prove this model is great? So example, if someone reaches out to me and say, hey, my AI solution is super great and it is able to solve this X, Y, and Z mathematical problems, then I would like to understand how your solution performed on different benchmarks set for AI. So example, some of the benchmarks for human interaction are MMLU or GLUE. They are
Yeah.
for general purpose LLMs. And for your use case, example, for data analysis, I would also like to know how it perform against benchmarks like maths or GSM 8K. And if
Yeah.
you are able to provide me, hey, this is how it is performing, you're able to provide some data about, hey, these are our metrics in terms of how many writes we are getting, how many false positives we are getting, and how it compares to other industry related AI solutions, I would get a very good insight about what I'm getting into. And I'm pretty sure by getting this information, I can also convince some of the other stakeholders why we should be going for your solution.
Hold on. So I came to you. I discovered what you wanted. I have convinced you that there is enough value. You come on a second call. Now, all of these pointers that you're talking about, and they may differ for different kinds of products. For an AI product, it might be this. Is there like a standard list of what an enterprise needs, or should I do that discovery with the buyer first?
I
Like
think
which
there's
is
a
like, "Hey,
standard
Krishna,
list. So after first call, you have provided, like, value proposition. In the
yeah,
second call, maybe you do not even need to have a second call. First, you need to provide the enterprise with information. Example,
proof.
like, the data model, like, what are the metrics, and the other sort of information would be what is the source and quality of your data, like how you're preventing any sort of bias in your models. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, there are AI laws in the EU, and as an EU
Yeah.
company, I would like to follow those AI laws. Now, does the data you train your models comply with EU law? I don't know. So you have to maybe inform me in that particular second call, as part of the second call, or maybe a follow-up email after the first call. After that, I would
Sure.
like to know that how do you ensure that in future, whatever models you're training, they will be complying to the AI laws made by the EU. And this is a very big hurdle, by the way, because a lot of established AI companies, they are already feeling uncomfortable and pushing back against it. For example, OpenAI last year said that if EU is bringing some very strict laws related to AI, they might not want to operate in EU. I don't know what is the
Yeah.
latest status, but this was the last status when I checked it. And then when we speak
Yeah.
about AI laws, we also have to think about data protection regulations. Example, are you GDPR compliant? How are you ensuring that no personal data is stored in your systems? How you are making sure that your data sets are publicly accessible while not having any personal information? So these kind of things
Yeah.
you need to provide to an enterprise so that they know that you are compliant. And then
Yeah.
another thing would be how secure you are. I'm not sure if you got to know, but recently 4 critical vulnerabilities were found in popular solutions such as MLflow and Hugging Face. They actually started the security scanning, and they fixed the problems already now, and they are running some sort of security scans on regular basis to ensure such kind of
That is.
vulnerabilities are not being targeted again. But this is keep on happening. I think last month or before, I read about an article that some 8 new vulnerabilities were found in supply chain related to AI. And I think for the attackers, this is a very good opportunity to access your data, to get more information what companies are doing, because AI is entirely new. People are still trying to figure it out. It is not as established as other software engineering practices. We do have some skill set, but a lot of people are actually doing boot camps now and getting into AI now. So there is a
Yeah.
huge skill gap in how you can take care of such kind of things. I think if you are able to get these 3 things addressed in the beginning, then there are only things like architecture, cost, and internal politics remaining. But these three
Yeah.
things, the compliance, the regulations, the security, these are the things which can make or break your deal without even having any further discussion.
So is it a good idea to, like, let's say I go through on the first call, the value bit is done, and then I just send you all of these details one after the other, or should I do it face to face? Like, what would you prefer? Because is it like too much to go through? Because I'm a nobody, like I'm a new company. You just met me once. Maybe you are borderline convinced that yes, I have a value prop, and if I send you a lot of emails, you're like, oh, this guy is just like irritating me. Like, what happens there?
I would say in the first call itself, you should first emphasize on how this product is good for the long-term vision of the company or long-term gains, and then you should also mention on high level like how you are compliant to the laws, regulations, and what are your benchmarks compared to the other solutions available. I think this all should be part of the first call. Ideally, I've seen sales reps speaking about these things on high level. They also speak about how easy it is to integrate, etc. I think initially you just provide this information on the high level, and then if the customer is interested to know more about it, you can send them some case study or some sort of a documentation about how you are dealing with certain things, and then customer have a very good perspective of how you are operating, and then you can easily build the trust as well.
Yeah, of course. So on the trust bit, I was coming to that as well. Like the benchmark thing that you talked about, it's probably best done by a case study. But if you don't have a case study, like at least send some documentation. Now, Krishna, one more thing, right? Like, so you talked about where is the data flowing? How are you gonna? Let's say I have done everything, right? Like, but enterprises sometimes still go on and ask, hey, do you have an on-prem offering, right? Like, and I understand why they do that. But could you shed some more light on like what's the logic behind it? Uh, how do you see that evolving? Like, do you see so if I say yes, and this is a mistake that I have seen a lot of founder friends do, I have at times also thought about it or been tempted to. When someone comes and says, do you do an on-prem thing? At the outset, it looks like, oh yeah, we can do it because technically this is what you would need and we can do like this. And every month we would send a patch and like, here's how, but it becomes a headache in the long run, right? Like, and this company is determined, like specifically if you're dealing with financial players or someone like that, they would never want to interact with like a cloud, which is not internally hosted on their server. So how do you like what's exactly happening here again from the buyer
Yeah,
side?
I think there are like two. So first of all, there are two things over here. First thing is that security and trust. Many companies are not comfortable giving access to their data to any other startup or vendor, because just of the lack of trust, they want to play it as safe as possible. Second thing, legacy architecture. A lot of companies are running on legacy architecture, and they cannot comply with all the requirements to integrate with a cloud-based solution. So that's why they prefer to do it in a old school way. Uh, but I personally feel that it is not actually bad. I feel, based upon my experience and what I have, different problems I have solved, a hybrid is basically a future when even if you think about, like, how you yourself are training models over cloud are very expensive compared to training them on an on-prem solution. And it may happen that you want to train some models dedicatedly for a particular enterprise because you have some very specific contract with them. So I would say this helps you in saving cost, and of course it reduces the latencies, etc. And when you want to scale globally, let's say, like, your partnership is going well, and now you started from Germany, but you want to deploy on Ireland or France or Australia. I think this is where you go cloud. So only for the deployment purposes of your application, you use the cloud, and most of the heavy lifting and compute intensive churn you can do on an on-premise system.
Yeah, awesome. Krishna, I have a bunch of smaller
Mhm.
questions now, right? Like which is all related to what we just talked about. So let's say everything has been done well, right? Like on-prem bit aside as well, all the value prop, the discovery, the security, everything is now done. Now, establishing that trust is okay. I've done it with historical proof and I have given you like some documentation and case studies. But then you're like, hey, show this to me on my data set, right? Like that is also known as the POC
Mhm.
phase, wherein you lay out. And for that also the scoping is something that most people go wrong in. Because if you take on like a very big scope, it will take you forever to convince them that this works. If you are my buyer, what are you thinking? Like, would you rather want, let's say, Crunch to demonstrate how analysis is done on one particular use case in a very like small data set than do a full-fledged thing? Or do you prefer like a full-scale deployment? Like
Yeah.
how do you recommend founders approach it?
So I would say always do a small POC on a small segment. This is the best way to go for it. In all the big organizations, there is some sort of R&D unit or some ongoing pilot program which focuses on new tech, example AI. I would say reach out to them, collaborate with them, and first demonstrate success over there. And by the way, in the conversation before, you mentioned about certain champions, right? So when you do the small POC, you will actually find some champions who really like your product and they would like to take it forward. In terms of building trust, as you mentioned, the trust part, a quick thing would be when working with an enterprise, you should double down, a startup should double down on their speed and agility, and they should propose, like white glove kind of a service, that hey, all your customizations, integrations, etc., we are happy to take care of it. We want to give you the best service possible, because this is something a well established and big vendor cannot do easily.
Yeah, but like, so should I be the one proposing it, or is that like, to me, like what we do is that we go through a discovery process. So we go in and talk to the customer, and then we identify what is that one use case. But sometimes those decisions go nowhere. Like those discussions where I'm saying like, hey, so you know what we do, you know all of this. Like I know you have 10 problems. Could you help me identify the one problem that we should demo it on for a POC? It just takes forever, right? Like what is the mistake that's being made there? Like should we push? Uh, this is my first question, and my second question, which is like maybe related to this, is in all of the things that we've talked about, I approached the enterprise, like I reached out to someone and then all of this setup. What can a startup do to also attract an enterprise? Because like, let's say you need a data analytics solution, or like you are dealing with something, chances are you would go to someone like Snowflake, or you'd go to someone like established analytics player like there's an Alteryx, right? Like, or someone like that. How can a startup position itself to be the tool?
Yeah.
So two questions probably.
Yeah. So maybe I go with the second question, and if it does not answer the first one, please feel free to repeat it. So there is no one size fit all answer to approach an enterprise, right? But I think what you should be doing is, if you want to contact any engineering leader, just write an executive summary about your product, how it has solved pain points or maybe some of other customers, and what problems it will be solving for you. Always always focus on a particular niche and provide some sort of case studies and discovery templates related to those particular niche. And if this person is interested, after reading your executive summary, which should not be more than 4 or 5 lines longer, they would definitely reach back to you and try to see how you can take it forward. And yeah,
Yeah, and sometimes persistence also helps,
exactly.
because maybe the leader is busy and like it takes you 3 emails for them to like actually get to click on that link. But my other question that still remains unsolved, so I'll repeat the question. The question was that we have agreed on everything, and then like let's say there are 10 use cases that are doable, and we're trying to identify what is that one use case which is of most importance to this enterprise that I should actually push the POC for. right? Like, because I don't want to pick on something which is a lightweight, low important solution, because then you're just not going to be as interested in giving feedback or working with us on actually identifying whether it can be made to work or not. And sometimes enterprises go very slow or cold here, right?
Mhm.
Like in those scenarios, should the founder pick up what that use case be, or should we like keep pinging the enterprise? What's happening on your end? Like if you are the buyer and this coldness comes in, why is that coming in? Is that also because the value itself has not been established? That could be the case.
I think a lot of time they are just busy with other things. It is nothing to do with you. Like I said, they are fine with being slow and maybe losing some benefit if they can solve the immediate problems in their hand. If you have found some engineering counterpart already, then maybe asking them to have some calls with some of the engineers would be a good idea, so that you can speak to those engineers, understand what are the actual problems they are facing, and then you propose, hey, based upon this small 30 minutes call I had with your group of engineers, I propose this particular solution to do POC for, and then you wait and see what they have to say.
Yeah. So maybe initiate a little bit and see if they're like warming up again. Krishna, so enterprise leaders, they're super busy. That's been established. Complexities arise when you're trying to sell to, let's say, the sales leader, but the deployment has to go through engineering, right? Like because now there's cross department work that in case of Crunch as well, when I'm trying to go to, let's say, COO, and I'm saying, hey, you know what, like my system can help you identify new businesses, but it will only work well when your data analyst has helped me set this up well for you. I need to connect with your databases. Of course, the CEO can't do it. It can't be self-served. Like there needs to be some sort of a setup. Uh, Now we are talking about two different verticals, and this engineering leader to whom maybe the analyst is reporting may have nothing like of. It might not just be of as significance to them, or maybe just they are caught up with other priorities. There has been a CEO review. Engineering is on a backlash for like some other things. Like, does that happen often?
Yeah, I think it is very common thing that there is some sort of cross connection happening to between the organizations, and I think I personally believe that if you are proposing a solution and this particular solution brings a great value to the company overall and is solving some of the problems for the leadership, then I would be happy to adopt it. And in your particular use case, I think CEO should speak to the engineering leader and then get alignment with
Yeah.
this particular person. And in the end, we all have to depend on each other and work together to deliver the best value for our customers in the end.
Yeah, and I think like that is why the champions are so important. Like they help you push, they help you give visibility into like what are the dynamics internally, and at the same time I think like the engineering leader is not opposed to the idea. Like they would help you as much if you can establish how this is going to help the company grow, because it's in the leader's favor as well if the company does good. So of course these things can be navigated very 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 well. Krishna, we're nearing the end. Is there any thing you're personally excited about as a engineering leader? Anything that, be it related to Prime Video, be it outside the world, that you are seeing any opportunities that you could share with our audience where like, hey, this is something that is largely still unsolved in enterprises?
Yeah. I was basically thinking about this particular problem a few days ago, and I see that everyone is so focused on generative AI at this particular point in time. But there are use cases beyond that. Example, I can see use case in solving the legal problem, data governance, sustainability. Example, I know a company called Alchemy in Berlin who uses AI to reduce the carbon footprint during the cement production. Like I was mind blown when I got to know about it. And I know some more companies like SkySpecs, which provides AI solution for wind turbines. And there is another solution called Octopus Energy, which are automating energy supply chain. I think there are different use cases, and people are very focused on a very small set of use cases. I think another interesting use case, which I would really like people to go for, is legal and tax. So basically, the tax system and legal, they are full of complexities, and each country has their own nuances. So I think that if there is some startup who can start to automate and use AI to solve this particular problems for a common person, it will lead to a very huge value. I'm pretty sure people will be happy to use it. I myself struggle with taxes and
Yeah.
legal stuff which I ever encounter.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I see the point you're trying to make, but it is exactly in these moments that the really smart people start working on use cases under everybody's nose. And then you see suddenly a big company that is coming up. And all of the sectors and energy things that you're talking about, they're like massively underserved. Like Gen AI
Exactly.
doesn't have to be, it should be an AI focus. It should not be a Gen AI focus. So
Exactly.
I love that aspect. Krishna, any closing notes, any learnings broadly with everyone? And where should people reach out to if they are enlightened by whatever they've heard and they just like want to hit you up?
Anyone can reach out to me via my LinkedIn. I'm very keen to discuss what people are doing outside of my immediate sphere. This is a great way to learn and grow, I believe. And I'm actively involved in mentoring as well. So if someone is looking forward to work with me to progress in their career, then I'm super excited to support them, and of course I do it pro bono. And then thanks a lot, Vikram, for giving me this opportunity to have this amazing discussion. I really enjoyed it. We touched base upon a lot of different topics. I think you actually forced me to think beyond what I usually think, so I'm very, very grateful that we had this conversation.
No, you're very kind. And to be honest, this never felt like a podcast to me, because you see, like all of these things that I'm talking about, we go through them as challenges on a daily basis. Like even today, I was just out of the conversation. I was like, okay, what happened? We spent like an hour and we don't know what the next step is. And it looks like everyone went happy, but I know that no one is going to take the next step. So it's like something I keep talking to my team about a lot. And as early founders, it's never easy. But I love the transparency we had, and I hope someone who's actually going to cater to an enterprise get some value out of it, because they will. I would, if I had this episode recorded before me. So that's the best thing for me. The episodes that don't feel like episodes, they're conversations. Krishna, thank you so much. I'll let you go. We are like this extended rather than the ideal duration we go for, but it's just a really good sign. So I'm happy we did this. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye.